And we return to our conversation with Lisa Tusky. She is a marriage and family therapist with Prevea Health. Every year our families get together for the holidays, for Christmas, for New Year's, Thanksgiving. This year some of those may be virtual, but whether they are virtual or whether they are in person, how do we keep the peace at this particular year? Because this is a whole lot different. This is kids, should they be in school, should they not be in school? This is the argument of mask versus no mask. This is the argument of the political season that we have just gone through. And there's an awful chance for danger, let's say, at the Thanksgiving table.
There is, what is already considered to be kind of a dicey situation when it comes to conversations with extended family is extra dicey this year because we do have a whole host of new topics to add to the already list of sort of taboo topics that we tend to avoid. And people feel very differently about all of those topics that you mentioned. And you can very much get one side or the other. Now, what I'm recommending to the clients that I see is to try to keep the conversation as neutral as possible. One of the things that can be really helpful is to just use I statements. So I feel or I believe instead of you. To say you're wrong or
oh, sure.
That sounds very attacking and usually doesn't go over very well. So to say, well, I believe or I feel or this is what I'm going to do for my family is sometimes a little bit easier for people to take in that information. And just maybe even being clear when you're going to attend the holidays either virtually or if people are doing it in person, that there's certain topics that if it gets too heated and too contentious, you're just going to get up and walk away. That's okay to go ahead and take a break.
I've noticed in certain situations when we are at Thanksgiving, we're often with people that we're not with very often during the year. We're with them maybe once, maybe twice a year. And those people don't know where you stand politically, let's say, but they think that you are in their corner and they'll whip off a statement and you'll look at them like, no, I'm not there. And you can find yourself wandering into an argument before you know it.
Oh, absolutely. It's always that decision between, do I say something or do I just keep my thoughts to myself? My experience has been much of the time, our arguing with somebody who has a different opinion than us is not going to yield any change in how they think. There's absolutely nothing wrong with stating your opinion, stating your facts, but then to leave it at that, to not go further, to not go past that. It's very easy for a conversation to turn into an argument. And at the holidays, things are already really tense. Often people have been drinking more. It's easy for that to go awry. So making those decisions between, is this worth having that conversation or not? It's okay to let some things just go unsaid. We don't always have to give our opinion.
Is it a good idea to plan ahead of what your response is going to be? I mean, let's say it's 2-3 days right now before Thanksgiving, and you know where Uncle Bill stands on a certain topic, and you know what he's going to say. Is it a good idea to have a plan of attack? If he says this,
absolutely.
I'll do this.
Absolutely. It's great to go in having a plan of attack with, if somebody says something, this is what I'm going to say, or this is how I'm going to avoid those conversations. Maybe not in sitting too close to the person or spending a significant amount of time with the person that you know has a very different opinion. Not engaging in that conversation or trying to keep the conversation with those people that have a different opinion, trying to keep that conversation about other things and steering it into other less topics that aren't quite such a landmine.
Worst case scenario, you're at the Thanksgiving table, the argument gets heated, somebody walks away from the table, but you're the host or hostess.
Oh, yes.
How do you handle
that?
Well,
that is always difficult. Usually I like to give people a little bit of time to calm down, so I encourage the host or hostess to just sit there for a few minutes, take a few breaths, let the dust settle a little bit. The person that has walked off will probably come back. If they don't, you go ahead and go check on them and see how they're doing. And then, depending on how that goes, some people will choose to leave, some people will choose to stay. The host or hostess luckily can have all of the food to help to distract. So often moving on to let's serve a different course, or let's have dessert, or everybody let's go play a game, some sort of distraction. Having that planned might be kind of helpful.
I have heard some people even have gone so far as to call their home a issue-free zone for that day. You just don't bring anything up.
Yep. That is definitely one of the options, is to say these are the topics that are off limits. We are not talking about these topics, or we're going to talk about how are kids doing in school, meaning how are your children doing, or how are you doing, but not talking about the broader opinion of should children be in school, should they not, do we mask, do we not. It's more how are you doing in this particular situation, and asking that specific question as opposed to having a more general political discussion.
Yeah, you don't have to talk politics.
Correct, you do not. You can ask people how they are and be concerned and interested in their well-being and how they're coping through this pandemic and how their children and other loved ones are coping without it being political. We can show that we care and make those connections without taking a stance on something.
Maybe a good time to do face-to-face that horrible Christmas letter that's
yes. And luckily, if people are doing Zoom, you know, they can just mute.
Right.
If you're having a Zoom holiday, you just can just push the mute button and then wait till that person is done talking.
Are you concerned at all with the level of anxiety we have? Are you concerned it's going to increase as we go toward Thanksgiving and then Christmas and then New Year's?
You know, I do. We're dealing with what's already a difficult season. The holidays, winter, you know, this time change, once we flip into it's dark at 4 or 5 o'clock, that just tends to be a difficult time for people. The weather's not great, we can't be outside, so people are inside, closer together. It's already a difficult time of the year. And now you add in the fact that you have all of these other things that people can't do. Children are not going off to school, people are not going off to work, activities, sports, you know, different events aren't occurring, so there really is not an outlet or a break. And that can be extra exhausting on top of just the normal difficulty of this time of the year. Now, I still think logistically it can be difficult. People trying to figure out, how do I shop? Where do I shop? What do I do as far as Christmas and presents, and how do I set some of those limits if I don't feel comfortable doing some of those traditions? One of the things that I've talked about with a lot of my clients is that, you know, the pandemic it's kind of like that static in the background when you're listening to the radio and it's just slightly off tune. You can still hear the music, but that static is in the background, and it's annoying, but you get used to it. Now, this pandemic is something that many people are it's starting to be that static. They're getting used to it. They have found ways to live their lives. They found ways to make all of these things work. But it's not normal, and it's still annoying, and it's frustrating. And often we get very fatigued, all of a sudden just very overwhelmed by anxiety, stress, the management of it all. Many people forget how difficult this really is. And it's not something that we've ever endured before.
You know, we're talking about maybe a Thanksgiving dinner being ruined or a Christmas being ruined, but there's a deeper problem out there for some people. They're unemployed and have been since March. What do you say to those folks? Because a lot of them are still waiting for that first unemployment benefit check to come through. I mean, they just have nothing at this point.
Yeah, and what we are saying to those people is, please reach out and talk to people. You know, we are worried about people's mental health, depression and anxiety in the face of all of these stressors. And that there are supports out there. You know, we have a lot of different resources available in the community. If you're not comfortable talking to somebody that you're close to, family, friends, then to reach out, talk to your doctor, if you have a counselor, talk to your counselor. These are very, very difficult times for many people.
And it has to be frustrating for those folks who don't have the job and don't have the paycheck when they're watching what's going on in Washington and in Madison, or should I say what's not going on. And it's got to add to their frustration.
Absolutely. I think there's so many things that are so difficult for all of us. We can look at it and say, oh, why isn't somebody doing something? Or why can't it be different? It's really hard to not have control. When we talk to people about issues around the pandemic and mental health in general, it's really focusing on what can I control versus what can't I control. You know, we don't have control over many things, and so stressing and worrying about those things is often unproductive. We really need to try to focus on what can we control, and try to have an impact just in those areas. And that may be in our own personal life, that may be in extended family, in our community. That looks different for everybody. But really looking at what can I control versus what can't I control.
We are talking with Lisa Tusky, who's solving all of our holiday problems this morning, and we are back with much more right after this. We return to our conversation with Lisa Tusky, a marriage and family therapist with Prevea Health. Suicide is always a problem. Now it's even worse with COVID. What are you seeing? Are there different signs that you're looking for?
You know, the signs of suicide continue to remain things that we watch for. Any changes in mood, any changes in behavior, people talking about preferring that they would rather be dead or life would be easier if they weren't. And we are seeing increases in people who are having suicidal thoughts. We're seeing increases in people who are abusing substances, relapsing on substances as well. You know, the supports that have existed in the community, many of those were face-to-face. And a lot of that face-to-face support in terms of support groups and meetings and those types of things are now virtual. And that's not necessarily how people want to receive their support or can't receive their support. So we also know that people are more stressed because of all of these issues, which can raise some of the other things that are going on, make those things even worse. You know, it's just sort of becomes that sum total becomes too much.
Lisa Tusky, thanks so very much. You may have saved a few holidays, a few Thanksgivings. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Much appreciated. And if you have a newsmaker in your town who you think we should have on the show, let us know about it. Send us an email at tips@wearegreenbay.com or just message us on Facebook. And be sure to join us once again Sunday morning at 7:30. Until then, have a good day.